I wish I could wipe my memory and read this book all over again. Hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Corinne. Here we talk about all things reading, writing, reviewing books, etc. Last month I read The Raven Scholar and I haven't been able to get over it since. In my mid-year tier ranking, it's one of only two books that I ranked fully in S, and for good reason. This book kind of reminded me of reading Harry Potter as a child. Now don't run away, I know Harry Potter's a bit controversial these days, but there's no reason why this book should be tarnished with any of that negativity. I say that it's like Harry Potter because it's a fantasy story with a great mystery subplot. It's got lore that kind of affects the whole plot and the whole mystery. And we've got a main character, Nema, who is very much like Hermione Granger. We also have a bit of a house system. We've got the ravens, which are kind of like Ravenclaw, they're the scholars. We've got the foxes, they're very mischievous. They kind of work as assassins and spies. We've got oxes who are really strong. They do a lot of the engineering work. The mysterious dragons, the faithful hounds, the warrior bears, and the fun, creative performance monkeys. And I think that's it. And this does kind of give Hogwarts vibes, but it's in a very different adult context. And a lot of the characters that we meet in association with these houses kind of take on a lot of the characteristics of these animals in a way that is quite reminiscent of Harry Potter, where we had quite a lot of on the nose naming and characterizations. Except in this book, it's never like offensive the way Harry Potter sometimes is. This book is about an empire in this fictional fantasy world. It's an epic fantasy, so it's on quite a large scale, but most of this story takes place on one imperial island. A new emperor is chosen every 24 years via this contest whereby every one of these big houses, these monasteries, put forth a candidate and they all compete. So we've got a big epic contest. It's not super bloody, it's not Hunger Games style. There's some fighting involved, but there's also other challenges, and each of the houses kind of designs their own challenge. So the Raven kind of house has a written exam that based on history and things like that. The fox's exam is quite crafty, and it all kind of makes sense with their houses. Oh, and there's the tigers. I forgot to mention them, and they are pretty important. They're warriors, kind of like the bears, but they're a bit more tiger like, a bit more stealthy, a bit more grace. And we have some quite questionable characters in the tiger house, shall we say. So this story, it follows this contest to choose the next emperor. But in the background, there is this murder mystery as well. Someone at the beginning of the contest is murdered, and our main character, Nema, has to solve this murder. And she's doing this while the contest is going on. So we've got a very full plot. We also have this event that happens at the beginning of the novel. It's not a prologue, it covers several chapters, but it is prologue like in the sense that it happens several years before the main story, and the events of this prologue, for want of a better term, affects the main story quite significantly, and it's lore that you have to be aware of throughout the story. And it was really effective, it was really emotive, and it was a really interesting way to introduce us to kind of our main cast of characters. This prologue kind of section also opens up the world a little bit more for us because these events happen not just on the Imperial Island, but it takes us to some other locations in the world. And the world and the different settings is really interesting, and I'm excited to go out into the world and explore more of it in the next book in the series. We don't get lots of that here, we get little snippets, but things stay quite contained in the island, and I think that works really well. It's a little bit like in Harry Potter, where everything's mostly contained at Hogwarts, and so you get to know it really well. It's a similar feel here. And the murder mystery, it has so many different levels to it. There are so many different mini mysteries and questions that you have to solve to get to the main solution. And there are so many twists and turns. Just when you think you've figured it out, there's another twist related to something else going on that just blows your mind even further. Another interesting element to this world is each of these houses, based on the raven, the fox, etc., they kind of worship a deity, which is literally the raven, the fox, and these are kind of gods in a way that come from another dimension. And people are always saying, by the eight, when they are hoping for good to happen. But whenever they say by the eight, other people in the room always respond with and remain hidden. Because there's all of this lore that if the Eight return to this realm, it will mean the end of the world. So we also have this big threat of the Eight returning throughout the whole story. And I don't want to get into spoilers too much, but these entities, the Raven, the Fox, they do have a role to play in this story. And they're quite interesting characters in and of themselves. They really throw a spanner in the works, shall we say. And we do get to meet a cool Raven character in the story called Saul, who really is a highlight and adds a lot of fun to the story. Tonally, I think the story is really fun. There definitely are some dark and heart wrenching moments in it, but for the most part, there's a lot of levity and fun as well. The characters are all quite quirky, they have banter with one another, they can be immature at times, and that's one of the main criticisms of the story is that it sometimes feels a bit immature. All of the characters, including our main character Nima, they're in their late 20s, early 30s. However, I think maturity doesn't necessarily come with age. Yes, we would hope that people wanting to become the emperor probably would be more mature, but I think maturity is a spectrum, and there's definitely people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s that are very immature. So I thought that their characterizations were quite realistic. And like I said, it makes the story really fun. And even though dark and sad things happen, it's not a story that ever weighs you down too heavy. There's definitely lots of light and darkness that make for a really fun and enjoyable reading experience. Kind of in the same way that Harry Potter is mostly a really fun and light story, but it makes you cry sometimes. I think maybe this tone didn't work for some people that were looking for more epic high fantasy. People that are more into, say, Lord of the Rings, this reads a little bit more immature. But if you're coming from more of a romantasy kind of background and you've not read epic fantasy or fantasy that doesn't have a strong romance subplot, let's say, I think this is a really good intermediate kind of book. It's engaging, it's fun, there's a romance in here, the characters are great, but it's world building on a larger scale. It's lore on a larger scale. The plot is more complex. Everything gets bigger without it becoming heavier. The writing style is also really interesting. It's not first person perspective, it's kind of an omniscient third person that closes in on certain characters. At some points, we're actually following like the Raven God as they kind of move around and see different things that are going on, which is really great because it means you're not just chained to Nima. When we do follow Nima, which is for most of the book, we close in on her thoughts and feelings and it becomes more closed third person. But then we get moments where we pull out and maybe see some of Kane's inner thoughts and attitudes and lots of other characters as well, without it having to be broken up by different chapter character headings. This does take a little bit of getting used to at first, and it took it happening a few times for me to realise okay, we're actually kind of following an omniscient Raven point of view rather than certain characters. And the blurb very much makes it sound like it's Nima's story and we're following Nima. But like I said earlier, this opening of the story, the first 5, 6 chapters that are prologue like, we're actually following completely different characters. So I think that could be a little bit jarring if you're not expecting it. But if you just roll with it, trust the process, it all works out fine. And I really liked this narrative style. I thought it was ambitious. I thought it was really skillfully done, and I thought it really added to the story. It wasn't just a gimmick. It allowed us to see things that not all of the characters knew, and I always really like it when, as a reader, you have more information than the characters and you can kind of watch them and be like, oh my god, don't do that. No, no, because you know better. I think it adds for a lot of tension and conflict. Now let's talk about Nima herself. Nima is a black woman, she's the Raven Scholar, and she's a very interesting and complex character. She's very similar to Hermione Granger. She's quite unpopular for reasons I won't get into. There's some things that happen at the beginning of the story that makes her unpopular, but she was also generally a bit unlikable before that happened. She's really into her studies and she's got this tendency to always want to correct people when they say the wrong thing, very much like Hermione Granger. She also has some questionable morals sometimes. She doesn't always do the right thing or say the right thing, and I think that makes for a really interesting character. But it also allows a lot of space for her to grow and develop as a character, and I think we'll see a lot more of that in future books as well. Another character that we follow is Cain, who is the fox candidate for emperor, and he's really important. And we actually have a bit of a romance subplot with Nima. Won't say too much about it, but there is romance in this book, and it's very fun. It's very full of conflict. There's a really interesting journey and arc that they go on, but it never strays into smutty territory. So it's not got that romanticy feel. Whenever there are intimate scenes, it's very clear what's going on and what has happened or what's happening or what's going to happen, but you never feel like you're just sitting in the cup chair watching it, which I appreciated because I don't really like that sometimes. It's okay if I know it's a smutty novel and I'm going into it partly for that. However, when I'm just vibing with the story and the characters, sometimes it feels a bit odd to be a fly in the wall in those scenes because, like, that's my friend, that's my gal. I don't need to be here for that. So I like that this didn't go in that direction. I feel like there's probably a lot of pressure these days to include sex in new adult novels, and I'm glad that it's not always included where it doesn't really make sense to. And there's so much else going on, and there's so much substance to the romance as it is. We didn't need it, we were well fed already. There's so much else that I loved, and I could go into specifics, but in order to do that, I'd have to go into spoilers, and I kind of want to keep this video spoiler free. If you have read The Raven Scholar, let's talk about it in the comments because I would really like to gush about it more with someone. And if you haven't read it, take this as your sign to go read it. Is it a perfect novel? Is there probably criticisms to be made about it? Yes. But I loved it so much and I had so much fun that I'm willing to forgive any of those criticisms. And to be honest, I've watched some critical reviews where people bring up things like the immaturity of the characters, and I just kind of disagree. I just thought it was great. I loved it. It blew my mind, and I'm so sad that the sequel isn't out until like October 2027. It's like over a year to wait. But I'm also glad that it gives me an opportunity to forget about this book as much as I can and then read it directly before the sequel comes out and just have the best month ever. It's really rare, I think, to find a book that I love so much and have so much fun reading that also is just genuinely good and has a lot of substance. And I feel like I found that here, and I'm so grateful that I gave it a chance. And it really did bring back those feelings of reading Harry Potter and wanting to stay up after my bedtime to read it. So please, everyone, go and read The Raven Scholar, do yourself a favour, and come back and let me know what you thought of it. You're welcome. Thank you so much for watching. For more videos about specific books, wrap-ups about what I'm reading, and videos about writing, subscribe, follow along, let's be bookish friends, and go follow me on Instagram as well, where I share similar content. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!